Hi there, I'm Tom Spencer. This week on Central Texas Gardener, explore Monticello's vision with Peter Hatch. His restoration of Thomas Jefferson's gardens carries on its legendary lessons. On tour, visit Peckerwood Garden, a testament to John Ferry's voyage into botanical discovery. Daphne explains how botany and horticulture intersect, and Jeff Pavlot shows off his spiny plant toolkit. So let's get growing right here, right now.
Support for Central Texas Gardener comes from GeoGrowers, offering custom soil blends for lawns, gardens, xeriscaping, and organic landscaping supplies. More information at geogrowers.net.
Peckerwood Garden in Hempstead is a testament to John Ferry's voyage into botanical discovery. His treks and tireless work expanded our views in our own gardens. Right now, join me for his story of adventure.
Peckerwood Garden is more than a collection of plants. It's a convergence of philosophy, exploration, art, and passion. It's a path to tranquility for the eyes and the spirit. And it's a meeting of science and soul, where patience and boundaries were tested, along with the plants that found recognition and renewal. Peckerwood didn't start with a sketch. It's been an evolution for both land and man, since John Ferry, professor of architecture at Texas A&M University and a painter, was captivated by another art form.
I had been raised on in a garden and in a little community in South Carolina that was there were lots of gardeners. There were probably 5 or 6 or 7 families, and the mother and father in these families both gardened. It was not just the wife doing the gardening. It was very much of a family thing.
But John wasn't a gardener in 1971 when a spring-fed brook on land in Hempstead, Texas, prompted memories of the magical places of his childhood.
At that point, I was teaching in College Station and had a painting studio in Houston. And the commute from Houston to College Station was just a little bit too much.
John's voyage into botanical art and architecture didn't start with an overnight epiphany.
It was a slow process. When I first moved, there were no trees on the front of the property at all. And so friends from Houston started giving me trees and plants and shrubs, this sort of thing, bulbs, all sorts of things. And of course I started planting them, and one thing led to another.
Another chapter began in 1983.
A tornado hit the garden and took out all the original trees that were here. We lost something like 15 big oaks in the garden, and something like 30-something pines came down. And I looked at it and I said, well, it's not going to cure itself by just looking at it. And so I got busy and started working, taking things out and moving things and changing. It changed the whole face of the garden, because what had been totally a shade garden immediately became a sun garden. And now the garden has gotten back and grown up again, and it's more or less a sun and a shade garden.
John recognized a chance to experiment with plants on a new level. Assisted by one of his students, Carl Schoenfeld, later they started Yucadou Nursery to populate home gardens with their discoveries.
And then in 1988, after the garden was pretty much established, Lynn Lowry, a very famous plantsman from Houston and from San Antonio, he had nurseries all over the state at one point or another. He invited me to go on a plant expedition to Mexico with him.
And John found another mission.
We'd go down one day and we'd spot a plant and say, well, this is a beautiful thing. We'll come back and collect seed on it 3 months later. We'll come back in 3 months and the goats had devoured the plants. And so overpopulation, overdevelopment is destroying a great many of the wonderful habitats in the mountains of northeastern Mexico. Lynn took us on 4 expeditions to Mexico, and on those 4 expeditions he taught us how to clean seed, talked about how to germinate the seed once we got them back into the country, how to get them across the border, and then of course after we found out that many plants would not do here that we were bringing in and trialing, we started, and we didn't start, but we got in touch with J.C. Ralston at the North Carolina State Arboretum in Raleigh. And he, in return, put us in touch with the University of California at Berkeley and the Arboretum in Seoul, Korea. And we started shipping seed to these people. And they, in return, started shipping us their Asian collections.
With each rescue or experiment, they tested every growing condition. The plants guided Peckerwood's drafting board.
This was influenced by what I saw in Mexico. The old theory is if you don't like the plants you're looking at one point, go around the mountain to the east side, or to the west side, or to the south side, and you see totally different environments on each side of the mountain. And so I learned from what I saw.
As an architect and artist, John sought a pattern of beauty as well.
It's the transition from one area to another is so important. It's a lot of design and a lot of work to get that to happen. It just doesn't happen overnight. To me, gardening and gardens are about space. And of course, you introduce color, texture, layering of plants, this sort of thing. But it basically comes down to developing a wonderful space, a magical space, as I call it. And magical spaces occur when you have various canopies. You know, it's about light. And in an open space, the light is totally different from in a space where you've got 5 canopies of trees, shrubs and trees.
As an artist who brings the work of other artists to Peckerwood through his Mexican folk art gallery and garden sculptures, John knows that significant beauty takes time.
Well, the thing is, you've got a multitude of things that are taking 12 to sometimes 20 years. I had a magnolia that I bought from Lynn Lowry in the early 70s, and it was 19 years before it flowered. But it was well worth the wait.
It's also about being patient through freeze damage, drought, or failure.
You just have to learn to live with these things. You have to be optimistic about them. There's something good about it, whatever happens. You could look over on this table over here and you can see tags, plant tags, and there must be 1,000 tags sitting on that table from the last 2 years. And these are things that did not make it. And so a lot of it is trial and error. It's the act of doing that's important. It's the act of planting the plant.
John is still experimenting, though yucca has moved off-site.
We'll test them in the garden, and some of them we will sell when we have open days. People that come out to see the garden always like to take something home that they've experienced, and so we have a small greenhouse and a small nursery in operation.
He opens Peckerwood to the public throughout the year and by special request. To ensure that his work continues, he formed the Peckerwood Garden Foundation.
I'd put too much work into something that was going to be lost or sold and, just pushed aside. And so I decided to form a foundation, and I did in connection with the national organization called the Garden Conservancy.
Volunteers and a few paid staff assist in Peckerwood's care, learning from the teacher who never stops learning. No doubt all of them ask, why the name Peckerwood?
When I bought the property, I had a friend, had a dog named Beauregard, and a very close friend named Maine. And so it comes from Auntie Maine. And Auntie Maine was married to Beauregard from Peckerwood Plantation in Georgia. And so it was sort of like it was a joke. And then it developed into later, people said, what are you going to name this? And we said, well, Peckerwood Garden. And then, of course, when Carl Shanefield and I developed Yucca-Do Nursery, we came up with the name Yucca-Do. And then we said, well, people need to learn to laugh and be happy about things. And the name Peckerwood at Yucca-Do Nursery at Peckerwood Garden will certainly make people laugh.
Well, we're moving from one spectacular private garden to another, but this is a private garden with a difference. It belongs to all of us. I'm talking about Monticello, Thomas Jefferson's exquisite estate in Virginia, one of the founding sites of American gardening. And joining me now is Peter Hatch, Director of Grounds and Gardens at Monticello. And Peter has had the honor of serving as director or working at the gardens there since 1977. So a lifetime commitment to a remarkable piece of American history. Peter, welcome to Central Texas Gardener.
Well, it's a pleasure to be here, Tom.
Always great to talk to people who have their hands in history and hands in gardening at the same time. And Jefferson's garden really kind of, in a way, was emblematic of his vision for the future of Americans as a people invested in a particular place, an agrarian and a rural people too. That's a part of the legacy of Monticello.
Yeah, I think Jefferson was an American gardener in a lot of ways, just as he was a father of a lot of American democracy. The gardens at Monticello were large, they were expansive, they were continental, they were experimental. They were kind of an experimental laboratory, and the vegetable garden, I often refer to it as a repository of an Ellis Island of new and unusual plants that were brought literally from around the world. Some 330 varieties of vegetables and 170 varieties of fruit. So it was also kind of casual in a lot of ways, that kind of broke from the traditions of the old world. So I think that it really began to define a certain kind, a very specific type of who we are as Americans. And the garden itself, it was a revolutionary garden, but it also inspired a revolutionary cuisine in the kitchen at Monticello. From this mass of unusual vegetables that were grown in the garden to being prepared in the kitchen for the table. New vegetables really from around the world.
Jefferson was really very conscious of trying to create a new model of gardening too, because I know he was a great student of the gardens of France and Britain, and he set out to do something really new and remarkable, didn't he?
Well, he wrote one time that the greatest service which can be rendered any country is to add a useful plant to its culture. So he looked at plants as really a vehicle for social change, for transforming America into a new type of land. And Monticello really became, as I said, sort of a botanical laboratory for new and unusual plants. And Jefferson himself was very much kind of a seedy missionary, as he'd get unusual things and try them in his gardens and then distribute them to some of the major plantsmen of the early 1800s.
He set out to create this new style of gardening, and it was a new style, not just a new plant material that he was.
Well, I think in terms of the ornamental landscape, Jefferson was a great lover of the English landscape garden, an informal garden. But he looked at the American garden as transferring kind of the concepts of this informal garden to the American forest. He said, in America, we can make gardens without expense. We have only to cut out the superabundant plants.
Right.
And he said that in Virginia, under the constant beaming, almost vertical sun of Virginia, shade is our Elysium, or our paradise. So he looked at using the native landscape and kind of modifying it in minor ways to create sort of a real new American ornamental landscape.
And shade is our Elysium here in Texas, too, I'll have you know.
I'm sure. I'm sure.
Now, a remarkable legacy that really lives on. His impact, the impact of the gardens at Monticello can be seen still in American gardening and the plants that we use. And I know that.
Sure. You know, Jefferson's legacy is profound. When he was president, he kept a chart of the first and last appearance of 37 vegetables in the farmers market of Washington, D.C. over the 8 years of his political administration. And he actually went around, got seeds from foreign embassies and passed them out to local farmers. And I think Jefferson's legacy in terms of vegetable cuisine, he was primarily a vegetarian. In terms of sustainable agriculture, in terms of experimentation and farmers markets. All these things that we're so involved with today, were really kind of, Jefferson kind of sort of set the foundation for a lot of these things we're so interested in.
And when we speak of legacies, you've had this active hand in the grounds of Monticello themselves, because the gardens weren't always kept up. They had kind of disappeared, hadn't they, for a long period of time. So there's been a tremendous effort to recreate and restore.
Yeah, the flower gardens were put back in the 1940s by the Garden Club of Virginia, And when I came in 1977, I've been involved a lot with the fruit and the vegetable gardens and recreating Jefferson's 8-acre kind of practical garden on the south side of the mountain. It's a really dramatic setting. The garden itself is a 1,000-foot-long terrace that's literally hewed out of the side of the mountain with these panoramic views of the Virginia countryside. So it was what one visitor called a hanging garden. And it's also a profound microclimate because it faces to the southeast and captures this wealth of crop ripening sunshine and enabled Jefferson to grow vegetables all winter long, but also to experiment with a lot of new hot weather vegetables, things we take for granted today, but which were new at the time and which were really absent in Virginia gardens around 1800.
Yeah. Why is the legacy of gardening important? Why should we care about the legacy of gardens?
Well, I think we look to the past to learn about the future, and I think that if we don't learn from the past, then I think we might fail in the future as well. So I think history is also really fascinating. It's really fun, and I think there's so many lessons we can gain from studying Jefferson's efforts and his adventures in horticulture. And gardening was fun for Jefferson. He had a blast. He kept a diary. He kept a diary of when his peas were sowed and what color vines were putting on his ornamental arbors. So he reveled in multi-headed cabbages and odd-colored vegetables and other novelties of the vegetable world in a way that reflected almost this sort of wide-eyed curiosity about the natural world.
And I think in his latter years, his diaries were more full of commentary about the garden than politics or culture. Yeah, and we all know that he had far-ranging interest in those.
Right. Even at the age of 83, he read about 6-foot-long cucumbers in a Cleveland, Ohio newspaper, and in Jeffersonian fashion, he wrote to the governor of Ohio and asked him for seeds, and he got the seeds and passed them around to his friends and measured how long each one was. And at one point, Jefferson wrote, "Although an old man, I am but a young gardener." And here he was, even at the age of 83, I think very much playing this role of an old man but a young gardener.
Well, gardening keeps us all young at heart, I believe. Now, you have had a role in transferring some of the legacy of Thomas Jefferson back to the grounds of the White House in Washington, D.C. Talk about that experience.
Right. I think, you know, as I said, I think Jefferson's legacy is really profound. Alice Waters prepared a meal at Monticello for 300 people last April. The White House chefs have come down to Monticello and kind of become inspired by the Jefferson legacy, and they've reserved a special place in Michelle Obama's kitchen garden at the White House for Jefferson plants and seeds. And so I think Jefferson's, like I said, legacy is profound. It's enduring. He was first in food, first in gardening, first in wine, and he's easily called America's first foodie in this trendy world of today.
Well, and we're indebted to that foodiness. Now, he was also, you know, we think about organic gardening as something new in our time, but very much he kept his eye on the principles and ancient practices, really, of organic gardening, and that's something that...
Yeah, you know, Jefferson was Secretary of State when he got a letter from his daughter Martha, and she complained about the insects ravaging her cabbage plants as fast as she could set them out in the garden.
Sounds like my radio show.
And Jefferson wrote back and said, well, this winter we're going to cover the entire garden with a heavy coating of manure. When plants are growing in healthy, rich soil, they will in turn, in Jefferson's words, they will bid defiance to droughts and insects and all the maladies that infect us in a summer of gardening in Virginia.
Bid defiance to to the aphids and the chewing grasshoppers. Well, it is an absolute pleasure. Now, if people want to experience Monticello and see the handiwork, it is something that they can do. Either on the ground or through your fabulous book, A Rich Spot of Earth, which is just it's a beautiful book, beautifully photographed, and it's a genuine pleasure to be here. And I take it folks can come any time of year, right, to Monticello?
Oh yeah, Monticello's open every day of the year except Christmas Day, and we also have a really marvelous website where you can order seeds and plants that come from the gardens at Monticello and were once cultivated by the hands of Thomas Jefferson himself.
Well, there you go. So thank you so much for being our guest again. Peter Hatch, Director of Grounds and Gardens at Monticello. It's been a genuine pleasure having you on Central Texas Gardener. Coming up next, it's our friend Daphne.
Hi, I'm Daphne Richards. With our fabulous interview this week on the Gardens of Monticello, it made us think about the study of botany and horticulture and where those two fields intersect, especially for gardening enthusiasts with such a zeal for learning and experimentation like Jefferson. Briefly, botany is the study of plant biology and would include subjects such as plant anatomy and physiology, and taxonomy, also known as systematics, which is the study of plant classification. In other words, plant names. Horticulture is the study of plant culture, or how to grow plants. A good botanical training helps with understanding how to grow and cultivate plants, so both fields are important to plant lovers. But gardening enthusiasts usually choose to focus on horticultural aspects of plant growth, learning about botany as they go. Jefferson was definitely a horticultural experimenter with a real love of gardening. His notes on all of his many projects at Monticello are truly fascinating for botanists and horticulturists alike. Our plant this week is chili pekin, one of Jefferson's plants collected in Texas. This prolific little pepper plant can be treated like a shrub in your garden instead of an annual like most peppers. It can die back in harsh winters, but you can usually prune out the bare growth and encourage the plant to keep on going. The chili pekin in our demonstration garden at the Extension office is about 4 feet tall and 2 feet wide and is covered in tiny flaming hot peppers all summer long. Full sun's best and very little water is needed, even in the hottest parts of summer. Our viewer picture of this week comes from Susan Brock, who's about to have a new cardinal family in her hanging basket of pansies. Thanks for the fabulous picture, Susan. To do in your garden this week, it's time to plant pumpkins. You can also plant hot weather annuals and deadhead your roses. Keep plants watered in this terrible heat as well. You can also go ahead and shear back lightly your spring flowering plants to help them bloom a little better for you through the summer. If you're interested in learning more about gardening in Central Texas, I'd like to remind you about Extension's fabulous workshops and programs that we offer. Visit travis-tx.tamu.edu for more information. We'd love to hear from you, so please visit us at klru.org/ctg with your questions and plants of the week from your garden.
Thanks, Daphne. Now let's check in with Backyard Basics.
Welcome to Backyard Basics. I'm Jeff Pavlat. The right tools are essential to any gardener. Most of my plants are cacti and succulents. To make these plants easier to work with, there are a number of helpful tools. Today I want to share with you some of the items in my toolkit. One of the most helpful things that I have are these large tweezers or forceps. And they come in really handy for removing debris within the leaves of sharp plants like agaves, and also weeds that love to get stuck right at the base of these plants. And also on cacti, you can use them to remove leaves. And they come in a set of 4 different sizes. There are also some sharper ones that for really fine little areas to reach in. And I also keep a pair of small tweezers for myself to remove any spines that get in me. Another helpful tool is a piece of wooden dowel, and it's cut to about 12 inches. And I use it when I'm repotting. And you can use it to smash the soil down around the edge of a plant. And it comes in real handy so your fingers don't get poked. You can also use chopsticks the same way. I also like to keep labels, and I use 2 different types of labels. First of all, I have these metal aluminum labels, and they're really handy because they don't ever break down. The plastic ones, actually, after about a year in the sunlight, get brittle. And I use a mechanical pencil to write on them. I just make sure to get one with a wide lead. And I keep kitchen brushes, and these can be used to clean out potting soil that gets in the leaves of the plants, or also a lot of times spider webs. And it's also handy to have a steak knife, and I have this plastic protective cover to keep from cutting myself. But this works well to remove leaves at the bottom of agaves. And also, I keep a larger serrated bread knife for big plants. And I like to remove the old dead leaves off the agaves in my garden, and this works really well. It also is good for pruning prickly pear. And then these are hemostats, and they are really handy for grabbing spiny plants. All you have to do is press it down into the soil and lock these, and you can actually pick up the plant without getting your hand too close to the spines. And if you have plants in a flat, it's easy to grab one out of the center. And I also keep pruners and kitchen shears, which are good for trimming off just little sharp points. And these are aluminum ice scoops, and they work really well for potting soil. And I also like to top dress all of my plants with granite gravels, and the scoop also is handy for that. I think you'll find these tools helpful in dealing with some of the spiny things growing in your garden. For Backyard Basics, I'm Jeff Pavlat.
Find out more at klru.org/CTG. Next week, liven up your home or office with indoor plant decor. Until then, I'll see you in the garden.
To learn about today's program, watch online and follow CTG's blog. Check out klru.org/CTG.
Support for Central Texas Gardener comes from GeoGrowers, offering custom soil blends for lawns, gardens, xeriscaping, and organic landscaping supplies. More information at geogrowers.net.